A coyote in our backyard and our dogs are going crazy. Hey guys, welcome back to my kitchen. I am working on a menu plan. If you have seen my how I meal plan video, which I will post in the description down below, it works so great. It has worked for our family for a really long time, but I was really wanting to switch it up. I was starting to get really frustrated with the fact that I would plan a meal and I would shop for that specific meal and then I would be stuck having to make that specific meal. I just felt like I wasn't getting to be as creative in the kitchen as I wanted to be, and it just really started to feel like I was being kind of pigeonholed into being forced to make things that didn't necessarily sound good anymore once I got to that day in our plan. So I started thinking about how in my closet I do a capsule wardrobe, and if you're familiar with what a capsule wardrobe is, basically it is where you have so many categories and each category has so many articles of clothing in it, and then you're able to mix and match all of the things to make really an unlimited amount of outfits. And I thought how great that has been for my closet. Maybe that's gonna work for my kitchen too. We're gonna give it a try this month and see how it goes. So with that understanding of how a capsule works, I am going to talk to you guys today about the different categories, items that I decided to put into those categories, and a little bit about why. So I ended up with 5 categories, and I also am giving myself some freebies. So there are some things that I keep on hand all the time. I buy in bulk. There are things that are found really in most kitchens, and those are things like flour, sugar, baking soda, baking powder, olive oil or some kind of a cooking oil, that sort of thing. Some basic spices that I will use. I decided to not make a category specifically for those things. Okay, so then the other category that I am able to avoid are the breads, because I usually make those things from scratch anyway. If that is not stuff that you are comfortable making from scratch, by all means add a category of that. I would just highly suggest adding things that are multi-purpose. Things like tortillas that you can use to make tacos, burritos, quesadillas, but you can also use as like a wrap. That's really handy to have something that you can use for lots of different stuff. And that's kind of the purpose of the whole thing. My first category was protein. This one was not that difficult, honestly, for me to narrow down. There are a few proteins that we do use regularly that I didn't add to this, but for me, I added bacon because I can use that just eating it as meat. I use the grease from it for flavoring, and then sometimes I will cook it and crumble it up and use it as crumbles. So that's something that I can get lots of different uses out of. Eggs are another one. You can use those in so many different ways, but mostly we just have chicken, so we have a lot of eggs, so I kind of didn't have a choice but to include that on mine. And then the last one was chicken. So I'm actually including a whole chicken and boneless, skinless chicken breasts. And the reason for that is because boneless, skinless chicken breasts, it's possible to get dinner on the table a lot quicker sometimes, but there's a lot of uses for a whole chicken, and I'll talk about that again in just a little bit. Next category that I had were our starches or our carbs, and that I chose pasta. You can use that in tons of different things. Potatoes, you can cook potatoes a ton of different ways. And then the last one, if you have seen almost any, I think, of my meal plan videos or my grocery hauls lately, they have almost all included the frozen tortellini from Walmart. It is my favorite way to add some oomph to a meal. It is multiple ingredients because you're getting the pasta, but you're also getting the cheese inside of the pasta, but you're only paying for one thing, so that's really nice. So that one kind of had to go on our list. We're just using it way too often right now. The next category that I have are vegetables. This one was a little bit more difficult for me to narrow down, and here's why. I wanted to make sure that I had things that we could cook with, that I would be able to cook and they would be good, but I also wanted to have some things that we could eat raw, because because my kids really like to do that. They like to snack on raw fruits and vegetables, but a lot of times I will make a starchy dinner and then just have fresh vegetables on the side. And so I wanted to make sure and get things that I could kind of use both ways. Carrots and tomatoes both work really well like that, so they had to go on my list. Onions and garlic I use in so many recipes. Those are just a base thing that I think every kitchen should make sure that you have all the time anyway. And then I wanted to have some greens, so I included spinach and romaine lettuce because we like to have fresh salads sometimes, either as a meal or with a meal. Having those greens in our diet, not only is that necessary, but it also can make dinner a lot quicker sometimes if we're just throwing a salad together. My next category are things that I keep in my pantry. So I have 4 things in here. One of them actually stays in the refrigerator, and all 4 of these things are things that we have all the time anyway, but are things that maybe not every kitchen has. So I definitely wanted to include them. The first one was honey. So I don't make a lot of meals with honey, but I do use it in almost every bread recipe that I make. And then sometimes we like to have it just on fresh baked bread. The next one is tomato sauce. So you can add basic spices to tomato sauce to turn it into so many different things. You can use it in Mexican food, Italian food, American food. And because of that, it felt like it was an ingredient that needed to go on this list. Up next is chicken stock. Now this is another one that I would say should be a staple in everyone's diet and in everyone's kitchen. I use it in so many recipes. And the chicken stock is actually why I found it necessary to have the whole chicken. So even though the boneless, skinless chicken breast is easier and quicker to cook, having a roast chicken allows me to make homemade bone broth, and it's healthier and far less expensive than what you can buy at a grocery store. And then the last one is Caesar dressings. It's one thing, just like the tortellini, that you can get and it gives you kind of multiple ingredients all at once, but it's going to make salad night a lot easier and a lot faster if I'm not making that myself. My last category, and probably the one that was the most difficult for me to pare down, was dairy. So I actually don't eat a lot of dairy. I don't love it, but the rest of my family really does. And so being able to make all of the dishes that I wanted to be able to make this month without having all of the different kinds of cheeses might prove to be a little bit of a challenge, but it's one that I am going to stick with. The first thing that I have on my dairy category is heavy whipping cream. So you can use that for a ton of stuff, but my favorite way to use it is to just finish a recipe off. So mashed potatoes, soups, I love to just finish a recipe with a splash of heavy cream. Next one is milk. That is one that we just cannot do without in our house, so that one was necessary. Also, this one's not gonna be a surprise if you have watched any of my Azure Standard order hauls, and that is butter. Butter is the #1 thing that I keep stocked in my refrigerator in my kitchen at all times. I use it for so many different things, and so butter had to absolutely go on this list. And then the last 2 are cheeses. I decided that since I'm getting kind of the Italian flair of cheeses with the tortellini, I was going to go with cheddar cheese because I can use that in a totally different way, and Parmesan cheese because it just has so much flavor. So that's capsule cooking. I hope you guys will hang out with me for the next month and walk through this with me, see if this works. I am going to show you guys recipes. I have 15 that only use these ingredients. I know it seems like that's limiting. I know it seems like that's not going to give me a great variety. I am going to show some recipes to you guys over the next few weeks that show how I can highlight specific ingredients on that list to give us some really yummy meals without ever getting bored of what we're eating. I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys my first recipe from this capsule. It is chicken noodle soup, but with a twist. And the first thing that I'm gonna do is get some chicken browned. For this recipe, I am going to use 1 pound, which comes out to be about 2 chicken breasts. And I'm just gonna brown those in some olive oil with some salt and pepper. And while I have that going, I am going to chop up some vegetables for it. So I'm gonna chop up onions. I'm gonna dice these really small just because that's how we like them in our soup. And I'm gonna dice up some of these baby carrots that I have as well. Once the chicken is browned, I will pull it out of the olive oil and I will add the onions with a little bit of salt, and I will cook those until they are translucent. All right, my onions are nice and translucent. They actually have a little bit of color on them, but that's okay. So I'm going to add some garlic now. So I have a decent amount of garlic in there. I did not measure it. I have no idea how much it is. I'm going to stir that around, and then I'm going to add my carrots and 2 quarts of homemade bone broth. I'm actually going to save my jar because I may end up needing a little bit more liquid, and if I do, I'm not going to add any more bone broth. It has a lot in there right now. I am just going to add a little bit of water, but I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to let everything cook and see where my liquid levels are at that point. Traditionally, chicken noodle soup does have celery in it, but I actually don't like celery, so it doesn't bother me at all to leave that one out. But if you want to add it, go right ahead. Celery salt or celery seed would also work really well to add that celery flavor that you're looking for. So before I turn my heat up and cover this and just let it cook those carrots really well, I do want to add a little bit of seasoning to it. So just a basic seasoning that I keep obviously in bulk is thyme. It's lemony and it's earthy, and it's going to add a really nice depth of flavor to this soup. I'm going to turn my heat up to medium and then let it simmer and cook those carrots all the way through. I chopped up the chicken and added that back in, and so now we just have our last ingredient to add. And this is kind of where the twist is. I got this idea from a dear friend of mine who used to serve chicken noodle soup with this in her restaurant, but that is this frozen tortellini. So rather than adding any other kind of noodles, we're gonna add this tortellini. Right, that's it. We're gonna let that cook for about 3 minutes, and then the pasta part will be done and dinner will be ready to serve. I am done with my first night of my capsule cooking plan, and I'm really excited. I did not come close to using all 20 ingredients in this recipe, of course, but the ones that I was able to highlight, those carrots and the chicken stock and then adding that tortellini, I am excited to serve this to my family, but I'm also just really excited to eat it. All right guys, thanks for watching.